Welcome to episode 38 of 100 Years of Marine Corps Tankers, a channel that was created as a way to honor the lineage and history of United States Marine Corps Army community. Through these interviews, the stories of Marine tankers will remain the test of time and will not be forgotten. This week's interviewee requires no introduction, as many of the previous interviews have cited Master Gunnery Sergeant James Graham as having an extreme impact on their lives and careers. BigTop Graham is a retired Master Gunnery Sergeant of 30 years of service during some of the most notable and difficult periods of Marine tanks, namely Vietnam, Beirut, and the Gulf War. We will also discuss his amazing career and many awards and recognition as a national champion powerlifter. It is with absolute respect and honor that I welcome to the channel Master Gunnery Sergeant James Graham.
Well, thank you very much. And I don't know who wrote that bio for you, but I'll send them a check in the morning. So, okay, we're good.
Roger that, Master Guns.
Let me introduce my team here that's making all this happen, because as people know who know me, you know, I'm sitting in my wife's office, not my office. I will never have an office. I'm sitting at her chair and her desk, not mine, it's hers. And all my team has made this all happen because I have no clue how to do any of this computer stuff. Okay, so first off, let me introduce my daughter, Christy. Stick your head in here.
Welcome,
that's
ma'am.
her. And her husband, TJ.
Hey, TJ, how you doing?
And that's him.
Very good, how are you?
He's a bodybuilder, but we let him stay around anyway. It's okay. And my wife, Shelly, the captain of the ship.
How you doing, ma'am?
And that's that.
Thanks for letting us use your office tonight. Nice meeting you all.
You're on your own. Nice meeting you.
Beautiful family, Master Guns.
Okay, what's next?
What's next is let's take a moment and rewind the clock all the way back to 1966. And what led up to you wanting to become a Marine?
Well, first off, let me back up even a little farther. Is that I was adopted by a very wonderful family that gave me the best childhood anyone could ever offer. And my whole life has been sports. I've been from football season to judo season to Little League baseball season and lifting all year round. When it came time to graduate from high school, you know, I was 5'10", and no major college is going to look at a 5'10" defensive lineman. So we had to find other employment. So I had a friend who was 2 years older than me, who was an Army Green Beret. And that actually was my career pattern that I had expected to follow. Well, after he'd been in a couple of years, he and I were talking about this, and he told me that I really should look at the Marines. He said that he felt that the Marines were just the way to go. And of course, I don't think there's a high school kid in America who really knows what the Marine Corps is really like. Right. You know, you go on the reputation, you go on what you see on TV, you know, but I was into that attitude of, you know, we're going to win, you fight to win, you know, you're in shape, you work out, you know, you do all that stuff. And that was right up the Marine Corps alley. And I had an excellent recruiter who didn't have to do much to recruit me. But I think in retrospect to the whole thing, I grew up in El Cerrito, California, which is walking distance from Berkeley, which is a Berkeley campus at Cal, was ground zero for every communist movement in America. And I think I was probably protesting the protesters, you know, was part of my drive that got me through it, you know, and in those days, we grew up hating communists, as we should be today, and hating anybody who didn't like America, because it was such a great place. And so that I think is what drove me into the Marine Corps. I joined on the early program I joined like in March or April, and I went to boot camp 6 days after I graduated from high school. Wow. My dad encouraged me to take the summer off and, you know, just enjoy myself and whatever, but I couldn't wait. I just had to get in there. I wanted to get in there with my drill instructor or my other privates and let's make it happen. Boot camp, here I come.
Mhm.
And that's where I went. So.
Did you know when you went that you were going to be a tanker, or how did that come to be?
No, in those days, the only guarantee that the recruiter had was ground or air.
Okay.
And I wanted to fight. I didn't want to ride around in a plane or anything or be a mechanic. I don't have any mechanical skills particularly. And so I wanted to be in force recon.
Okay.
Was my initial thought. Well, the first 3 days I was in boot camp, they didn't hardly let us sleep or eat or anything. And we went in to fill out a bunch of administrative things. And one of them was, what job do you want? And they went through the MOS chart.
Mhm.
And it was all I could do to stay awake. And I said, I got to find something where I don't have to walk. And so my choices were tanks, artillery, and motor T.
Mhm.
And fortunately, I was given the tanks. And I can't imagine my life not being in a tank. I just can't. The artillery, motor T, those are all good MOSs. But being a tanker is just different.
Mhm.
And I'm thankful every day that whoever made that decision, I wish I could shake their hand.
So you went through infantry training regiment back then. Is that right? Is that so after
Yes.
after boot
Yes.
camp? And then
Yes,
what unit?
San Mateo.
I'm sorry, say again.
And there was at Camp San Mateo.
Camp
at
San Mateo.
Pendleton.
Okay. And then what unit did you go to as your first tank unit?
Well, then from there, I went to tank school, which at the time was at Camp Del Mar.
Okay.
And then they let you go home and leave after all that.
Hmm.
And I was, Camp Pendleton was occupied by the 5th Marine Division at that time, because the 1st Marine Division, of course, was in Vietnam. And I was part of 5th Tank Battalion, and we didn't even have tanks. The tank battalion was at Los Flores, but we lived at Las Pogas.
Mhm.
And for a while, we'd go on working parties to help build the camp.
Okay.
And then once the camp was complete, we moved over to Las Flores. And then we actually got tanks, 6 months later or so. And then I arrived in November of '66. And then in August, I left for Vietnam. So I had a little time in the States to kind of learn my business.
And when you went to Vietnam, what unit did you fall in on?
I was 3rd Tank Battalion. And we started we were at Camp Evans, which was just a little north of Way.
Mm-hmm.
And my first firefight that I was in, we're not actually in the Battle of Way. We just happened to be there when it started. Mm-hmm. There's a river that we would go on, and we were getting on LCUs and bike boats and going out to the China Sea and up to Dong Ha, down through their river. And we operated up along the DMZ. Okay. Well, at the time, my platoon just coincidentally happened to be the last platoon of 3rd Tanks going north. And that was when the Tet Offensive started that morning. Wow. So we had to fight our way out of Way. We got hit by, I was on the LCU, but the Mike boat in front of us got hit by an RPG, and the tank went down. It was sunk. And we made it out, and we fought our way out of Way, but we weren't actually in the Battle of Way as people know it. But that was where my first firefight was. And we moved out to Dong Ha, and from there we helped build Quang Tri, which was just it's a big base, but just a little south of Dong Ha. And then shortly after my company, our headquarters was at Camlo Hill, which was north of Dong Ha, up towards DMZ. And my platoon operated between Camlo Hill and Camlo Bridge. And we provided security there for a while. And then that's where our company headquarters was. And then each platoon got farmed out to a different AO. And that's where we stayed pretty much the rest of the time. But it was right up in the DMZ. Okay.
And I think you and I had some conversations previously about the role of tanks, and kind of how that role has shifted over the years and changed and then changed back as it seems to be. The role of tanks during that period in Vietnam, Can you kind of talk about what your mission set was and how you all either
Yeah,
supported and
we were a support element, and we each had an AO. For example, first platoon may have San Diego, second platoon has Los Angeles, and third platoon has San Francisco, let's say. And you stayed in your AO, and an infantry unit would come into your area and do an operation, and we would be attached to them. Then they would leave and go somewhere else, but we would stay.
Mm.
And that's kind of how it rotated all through the season. And when the monsoons would hit, you'd have about 2 or 3 months of severe rain that you couldn't operate a tank in that kind of weather. So we would be put up somewhere in some camp, but you lived on the back of your tank for the entire 13-month tour that you were there. I ended up staying 20 months,
wow.
but the whole time we were there, right till the very end, we actually slept in a building, at the very end, because the units, my battalion was starting to move back to Okinawa, and I wanted to stay, so I extended my tour and went to a different company, which basically was the same thing. But the war was pretty much over for us at that time. In '69, we did after the Tet Offensive, we crushed the Viet Cong. There were no Viet Cong ever anywhere around. They were just totally destroyed. And one of the things that has always bothered me about that was the time that Walter Cronkite came back to the United States and told the American people that there was no way we could win the war. And we just crushed the Viet Cong countrywide, and we were on a roll, and things just everybody seemed to blame the individual Marine for starting the war and everything, and not refusing to go and all that. But it was a very difficult time when we would get new replacements in. They came with a totally different frame of mind than the guys that I had arrived in country with, and we believed in it so much. I was shocked when I would come home and see movies or the news about what's going on in Vietnam, or some stupid Vietnam movie where the guys that would go out on patrol come into their barracks, put their weapon up on their rack, and go out in town and drink beer. Now, what the hell is this? I never saw anything like that. Never even heard of anything like that. And then there were a lot of news reports about war crimes and all of this. I never even heard of a war crime when I was over there. I was there for 20 months. And we did our 13 months, and they had a program where you could extend for 7 more months, and you would get 30 days free leave anywhere in the world you wanted to go. And so all the tank commanders in our platoon, we all believed in what we were doing. We were fighting communism. The communists were horrible bastards. No matter what anybody tells you, they treated the South Vietnamese people horribly. And they were very oppressed whenever the North Vietnamese were around. So staying and fighting them was really, to me, there's no decision here. The war's not over. These people are still doing what they do. And me and the people I know are staying here. We're going to kick your ass. And so all the tank commanders, we agreed we would extend and stay one more tour. And even my crew, my driver was engaged to be married, so he had to go home. But the rest, everybody stayed, and we fought it. And then that's kind of when the war started to wind down and end. And in '69, I came home in June of '69, and I hadn't fired around in 3 or 4 months. So as far as I was concerned, the Marines up north, because we were so far north, you could see across the river, the Ben Hai River that separated north from south. You could see across, and if you look in your scope, you could see the North Vietnamese setting up their camps because of some nonsense about not being able to bomb the north or fire over there, whatever. That brings up another thing, but being Marines, we always find ways to innovate and accomplish the mission one way or the other. And what we used to do is every night you had to make up a range card, and all your targets, of course, had to be in the south. Well, we decided this is just nonsense, so we put our range card, put at least 1 or 2 targets across the river in the north, and it was great watching the next morning. Look through there, the communists would get up. They would normally have morning formation, have their flag raising and just rubbing it in our face.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one morning they woke up, their flagpole was busted in two. You know, most of their buildings and tents were had some heat rounds come to visit them during the night. Oh, and we just couldn't tolerate
Right.
stuff there like that. So anyway, that was that.
So within those 20 months, it sounds like you rose through the billets and ranks. When you got to Vietnam, were you a loader and then worked your way through, or how did that work?
Yeah, when I got there, I was on the CO's tank actually,
Okay.
and I was a corporal and I was a loader, and and we didn't assign people by seniority. We probably like I was the best loader,
Hmm.
you know, and we had my driver actually he was from West Virginia, and his hobby was NASCAR, so he would race in the local NASCAR races, not like a professional, but in local stuff. And when I became the tank commander, all I'd have to tell him is just show him on the map where you want to go, and he'd find a way to get there.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, it was phenomenal. You know, and that's kind of how everybody assigned the jobs to the crews. It was by your abilities, not so much by your rank.
Okay.
But I came there a corporal, and 20 months later, I left as a sergeant, tank commander, and wouldn't trade a minute of it for anything. And then while we're on the subject, before I forget, I wanted to mention a couple of people
Please.
that I just thought were the absolute best leaders I've ever seen. You know, when I got off the CO's tank and into a platoon, my platoon leader's name was Steve Larsen, first lieutenant.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you what, he never flinched, he never panicked, he never did anything. He was the consummate warrior, you know, and I learned right off the bat that the best leaders that are the most successful in combat are the ones that are the smartest. You know, Lieutenant Larsen was not a big guy. I heard through the grapevine he had gone on to medical school after he left the Corps, but you know, he was a very soft-spoken, easygoing guy. I don't know anybody who would ever say a negative thing about him, but he was just absolutely the best leader. I truly hope that he tunes in on this and understands how important that was to all of us, because we didn't know anything. It was a bunch of 19-year-old kids just want to kill communists. We don't know how to do it, don't know where to do it, but Lieutenant Larsen, just make it happen. And my platoon sergeant was a sergeant, not a staff sergeant or a gunner. He was a sergeant, Sergeant Sampson. He was a Hawaiian, and I talked to him when he was a first sergeant years later, but I'm sure he retired as a sergeant major because he was just an excellent platoon sergeant. You know, he had a way of connecting with people, you know, and without realizing it, I really learned a lot from the both of them, you know, about becoming a leader. And somewhere early in my career, some staff NCO had told me that as you're growing up in the Marine Corps, find people that are doing really well and pick some of their traits. And then the people that are not doing well, look at what they do and promise yourself you'll never do that. And as you grow and you develop, you know, you will develop bits and pieces of a dozen people or so along the way. And that's proved to be true, you know, and throughout my career, I've had the privilege of just working with just some very, very superior warriors, you know, and, you know, some of them stayed in the Marine Corps, some of them didn't. They went their separate ways, but they were real warriors. When you think about, I'm going to walk down a dark alley in a really rough neighborhood, who do I want with me? You know,
Right.
And it's probably not the guy with the spit shine boots and a high and tight haircut and scored 300 on his PFT. You know, like Chesty Puller used to say, let's go to the brig and see the real Marines. You know, when you're going into a fight, you want guys that are willing to fight. And I know guys that would rather fight than eat. And some of them retired sergeant majors, you know, and master gunnies. But when you got a guy that would rather fight than eat, I want him on my team.
Right.
You know, I've always felt that I want to try to surround myself with winners. You know, as I build a team to go on a float or go to UDP or whatever, you know, I want to be around winners. I don't care how many NJPs you had. If you're willing to come and be a part of the team and buy into what we're selling, you can play. That's just the way it is. But in Vietnam, it was just a great experience. And as time went along, we got different platoon commanders and different platoon sergeants, and some people do really well, some aren't quite well as qualified, but you learn from them all. You learn what to do and what to not do. And I came away from Vietnam feeling good about the whole process. I say I never saw a war crime committed. I certainly never saw a town you could go on liberty in. Because we lived on the back of our tanks just about the whole 20 months I was there, and I can't imagine it being any different for anybody else. My tour was no special thing compared to others. We all did the same. We all slept on a tank. We ate C rations. We showered with a canteen cup, and throwing water on us and soaping up, maybe once a week, because you couldn't have enough water. At that time, I think it was in '68, there was a big union strike back in the States, and we weren't getting enough food. Wow. And we were at a camp guarding this one place, and we weren't eating C rations. They actually had a mess tent hooked up, which meant for breakfast you got one scoop of scrambled eggs and a half a cup of green Kool-Aid. That was breakfast. Then you come back at 1500, 1600 for dinner, and you get one slice of roast beef and red Kool-Aid. That was it. Well, obviously with tankers, you got to find ways to innovate. So we had guys. One of our guys was on mess duty, and he would steal stuff for us out of mess hall so we could have lunch. So I can remember just about every single day. This went on for like 2 or 3 months. We get a 1-gallon can of cherry pie filling, and we would open it up, and the whole platoon would sit around it, and we'd take turns getting one scoop, one spoonful of cherry pie filling, and that was it. And honest to God, for 30 years, I never ate a cherry pie ever again.
At least it wasn't the forbidden
fruit. You just got to
fruit.
do what you got to do.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, don't eat. That's the big thing.
Oh, don't say the word.
So,
don't say the word.
We'll say the A word,
Right.
And so if there was somebody that came along who did, they'd probably gain 20 pounds during their tour. Because none of us ate the A word.
Right.
And that was that. So, but it's like, and again, it's just adapting to your environment. Like we were at one place guarding this one camp, and my tank was parked right next to an 8-inch artillery piece. And the first couple of nights, you try to sleep, and these guys are firing their weapons all night long, and you stand and watch every night. So when it's time to sleep, you sleep. And we got so accustomed to the artillery that the 8-inch would fire and it'd lift you like 4 inches up off the deck and slam you back down, and you wouldn't even wake up. We were just so tired and so accustomed to that sort of stuff. It just didn't make any difference. But one thing, well, not one thing, but one of the things that was always really funny is even today, I think there's a little bit of a rift between tank crewmen and tank maintenance. And our maintenance area in Vietnam was at Dong Ha, which was the biggest base north. Beyond that were smaller fire bases, but that was the big base. So when we would go in for services for our tanks, every quarter, this was like R&R. There was just absolutely awesome because we did not have to stand watch. So we could sleep all night, and they had a mess hall, and we could eat real food. And they had a little Alpha Company's headquarters was right there, and they had a little bunker set up like for a club. So you could go in and have a beer or two, whatever. No big thing, but it was just different. And so we went in for services one time, and we went over to Chow, and we sat at this picnic table, me and one of my crewmen. And there were 3 or 4 other guys sitting at the table that were the rear echelon guys. And spaghetti was the meal. And this is like heaven for us. All of a sudden, incoming, The mess hall is being blown to living shreds. The building is collapsing,
Wow.
everything, and all these guys are running to the bunkers. Me and my crewmen are sitting there laughing and grabbing everybody's tray with the spaghetti, thinking that, if this is the worst thing that ever happened, we are not giving up our spaghetti to go hide in some bunker for artillery.
Right.
And it's just, you're just so accustomed to a certain lifestyle that, it's just different.
Mm-hmm.
But one of our trips down there, maintenance was done for the day, and we were sitting on top of the tank. We only got a couple beers on the club, and just sitting on the tank, BS, and Alpha Company's officer of the day, some second lieutenant, and had probably been in country about 20 minutes. He comes over and starts yelling at us, and you guys can't be drinking out here. You got to be in the club's like 10 feet away.
Mm-hmm.
And we're out on the tank. I was not impressed by this at all. And so he gets a little indignant. And so my loader, his name was Bloomer, goes in the tank and pulls out the coax with about 2 feet of ammo on the end, and just stands up on top of the turret and just starts raking the place with coax ammo. All the second lieutenant, we never saw him the rest of the night. And everybody was laughing, all the crewmen. This was the funniest thing, But in our world, this is no big thing. Come on, get over it. We didn't hurt anybody. Well, the next day, Bloomer, the first sergeant, comes up, and he gets Bloomer, and he goes, obviously has to go for a psych eval, And so a couple of days later, he comes back, and if you just saw Bloomer walking down the street, you'd probably cross the street because he just doesn't look right anyway. So I asked him, I said, so Bloom, what happened with the psych? And he goes, he looked at me and I looked at him. He rolled his eyes back in his head. I rolled my eyes back in my head. And he said, you're just fine, son, going back to your unit. So we said, okay, that's our guy.
Right.
But anyway, that's our adventures in the rear. We did everything we could to avoid it. But when we had to go, it was heaven. Just, you got 3 days where the maintenance guys do the services, and we get to sleep in and hang out. And, you always run into people somewhere from their tank coming in for service. It was just really a pretty good time, But,
so what else from Vietnam you want to talk about?
Well, there was a story that I don't tell much, but I think it's time to tell this one. I had a really good friend that I was in with, and I'm from El Cerrito, California, which is a suburb of Oakland. Well, right across the bay is Redwood City, and that's where my friend was, in south of San Francisco a little bit. And we were in a tank school together. We were at Camp Pendleton together, and we were in the same platoon in Vietnam. Then he got put up back on the CO's tank, and he came out one day. His tank showed up. A Mike boat brought it out down to the river, and he came out and he told me, he says, "You're time for services." He said, "I'm here to replace you." And he had his tank. And he said, "Go on back and they'll hook you up." And I said, so he pulled into my slot. We had some bulldozers that dug us some defilade positions that we were in, and he took mine. And so I went back for services. Well, 3 days later, I came back to find out that they had been hit really bad, a really, really bad firefight that night. And that Ron had been shot right between the eyes, and it came out behind his ear.
Wow.
And I always felt that it should have been me, that, he took my place. He was a tank commander. I would have been right where he was. And also his tank was obviously targeted because other people had said that they got hit by like 2 or 3 RPGs, and the tank was completely engulfed in flames. Well, the tank commander next to him, his name was Larry Fuentes, and he jumped inside a burning tank. And the witnesses tell me that the tank was completely engulfed. And Larry jumped inside the tank because he didn't know that Ron had been hit. He was just he was dead, and he was gonna pull him out. And he did pull him out, and for that, he got a Bronze Star. And that was the only Bronze Star that I saw awarded anybody in my 20 months in Vietnam. So things have certainly changed nowadays, but nevertheless, so it came time that one of the things that you had to do was when someone was killed, the company had to send someone down to Graves Registration to identify the body for sure. So I went down there and my goodness, I don't care, the toughest Marine, this would buckle your knees, because I mean, there were bodies everywhere, missing arms and legs. And like over here would be a pile of legs, a pile of arms over here. The black guys and the white guys had different piles, you know, and there were Marines out there that had a big slab and they hosed them down, they cleaned them up before they sent them home. And then when I went to identify Ron, he was in a body bag in the refrigerator, and they had put like putty or something in the hole so that, you know, his parents wouldn't be too upset. So he was sent home, and then they come around, they collect all his personal effects. Well, he was my friend, and I didn't want all his effects to go home through the official channel. So I kept all his photographs, all his letters, you know, all his really stuff that you really want to have if you were his parent. And he was raised by a single mom and had a very little sister, and they were living just above poverty. And because I wanted to deliver this stuff to his mom and tell him really what happened. And so anyway, 6 months later or whatever, I go home and I drive over to his house, and I knocked on the door. His mother opens the door and is just yelling and screaming at me that I got her son killed. It was my fault. And I gave her all this stuff. She threw it at me, you know, right at my face, all these photos and different things. You know, and I'm 20 years old. Well, what do I know? You know, and so I kept it. In fact, I still have every single thing in my garage somewhere. You know, I wouldn't, but that incident was so significant to me that I thought about that every single day since 1968, when Ron was shot in April of 1968. That is a significant moment, because now that, you know, we're kind of in the era of doing away with tanks, you know, I just wonder how someone would feel if they were involved in doing away with it, if they would somehow end up at a Gold Star family's home to notify the family that their son or daughter was dead, and you had something to do with weakening the battlefield. You know, and I guess that's about as soft a term as I can use, because that's a very emotional subject for a lot of people. And especially when you've been face to face with a Gold Star mother who literally hates your guts for no reason and blames you for her son's death. That's a tough thing for anybody to go through, but I was young and dumb, and I just felt it was the right thing to do for me to take this stuff to his mother. And believe it or not, I'm actually glad that I did it, because it reinforces the idea of training, the concept of training. Why do we train? You know, do we get tired? Yes. You know, are we away? I had 11 overseas tours. And so I can honestly say that I spent a fair share of time away from my family.
Right.
But when you think about Ron's mother, the look on her face, the tears running down her eyes, tired doesn't count. It just doesn't count anymore. Because whatever it is, we're going to do what we got to do to make our Marines the most aggressive, knowledgeable, intelligent fighters on the face of the earth. And if you ever had to go through an experience like that, you would certainly change your opinion about what are we going to do today? Are we just going to go sit at the tank park and clean tools? Or are we going to do something significant so that you never have to endure a Gold Star mother who blames you for her son's death? So that was kind of an important thing. But I have another story on a little better side that happened in Vietnam. I've told this story a lot because a lot of people, first off, there are no atheists in a fight. There just isn't. If you've been in a firefight, you have to acknowledge that the reason you're still alive is at least some divine intervention of somebody reaching down and putting their hand on their shoulder and saving your life. Well, before I went to Vietnam, my mother had a friend who was a devout Catholic, and she gave me a St. Christopher medal before I left and asked me if I would wear this to protect me, and I said I would. You know, and at that moment, it didn't really have a lot of significance, but it was just, you know, I would do it because Eileen asked me to. Well, in Vietnam, we didn't wear our dog tags around our necks because it could get caught on something, you know, as you're moving around the tank or whatever. So we put them around our belt loops and then carried them in our pockets. So one day we get up in the morning, we're getting ready to go out, and I just, for some reason, pulled my dog tags out, and my St. Christopher was missing off my dog tags. The chain was intact, and you know, there was no reason why this should have been off, but I couldn't find it. So in the course of that day, we were on line going across a rice paddy, heading into a tree line, you know, and that's a red flag right off the bat. And I was on the far left, and my gun tube orientation was off to the left. And for some reason, no reason whatsoever, I just grabbed the override and I changed the direction of my gun tube so it was more towards the front. Seconds later, a mortar round or a rocket come in and hit the side of my tank, and all the shrapnel went off to the side. If I had left my gun tube where it was, it would have probably landed right on the top of the loader's hatch, and we'd all be dead.
Wow.
Well, we get going again, and about 20 minutes later, again, I just get a feeling, and I closed my clamshell about halfway up, so it was 90 degrees. Seconds later, a mortar or a rocket lands right on the armor deck. And when I looked at the clamshell, it was totally shredded in the back with shrapnel, you know, big chunks of shrapnel, whatever. So thinking this has been a really good day for me, you know, so we get done, we'll set up our perimeter for the night, and we're sitting behind the tank back underneath the pack a little bit. And this grunt walks up and asks if he could have some water. And I said, sure, I'll get it for you. So I grabbed his canteen and I ran, I jumped, and I put my foot in the sprocket, going to jump up on the tank, and I slipped. And I fell backwards, flat on my back. As soon as I hit the ground, a rocket or a mortar hit the water cans and just shattered them.
Wow.
The tiller ended up being cracked, and we had to replace the tank later. But I mean, my goodness, I would have landed in my pocket. So then, the next morning when the sun came up, we're inside cleaning up the tank, trying to make the best of it. And one of my crewmen says, Corporal, is this your St. Christopher medal? And it was located between the ammo boxes on the deck. You know, there's a little cracks in there. Mm-hmm. And it's important that you remember this, is it was down between the deck boxes. The eye of the St. Christopher medal was not damaged. In other words, the question is, how did it get off of my chain? Right. And how did it land in that particular spot? Because I sleep in the gypsy rack. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't sleep in a turret. Mm-hmm. Okay, so fast forward 15 years, we're in Beirut, and there had been some incidents with the Israelis, and even then it was politically incorrect to say anything bad about the Israelis, the Israeli Defense Force. Well, they had been probing our lines, trying to see what they could get away with. Well, I had 2 tanks, and we were stationed actually out at this Pepsi factory, which was about 100 yards outside the gate where we were at the airport. And the battalion commander came around one night and basically gave me my instructions. And he said, under no circumstances, no one will go through this checkpoint and come onto our camp. No one. I said, okay, I got it. So then the next day, I get up and don't pay any attention to anything. But believe it or not, I'm missing my St. Christopher medal off my dog tag chain. My dog tag chain is intact. We have a major confrontation with the Israelis. They had either two or three tanks, I think, just charged right up to our checkpoint and then slammed on the brakes and stopped at the last minute. We had a colonel, lieutenant colonel was like their leader, he was testing us. And he came up to, I met him out there, and I had my guys all programmed what to do. If I took my cover off, full speed ahead, we'll fire them up. You know, and I had two tanks there. And then he and I are talking, and one of their Jeeps with a 50 cal pulls up right in my face. The guy's got the 50 cal right at my nose, and he's charging it. You know, and when the round landing on the ground, charging it. You know, and I'm telling this colonel that, you know, you can't go through, and because he wanted to go inside the perimeter with his tanks. And I said, no way, he's not happening. He said, well, I want to speak to your commanding officer. And I told him, honest to God, I said this, request mass is 1700 every Friday. Do you want to see the colonel? And so he got back on his tank and they went away. And the Lebanese people, especially because we were right at this Pepsi factory, they had never seen anybody back the Israelis down ever until now. And it was like the 4th of July. Oh my God, they were throwing cases of Pepsis at us, you know, coming out, shaking our hands, wanting to feed us, you know, and all this, you know, and it was really funny because, I mean, to us, the Israelis are not going to shoot us, right. You know, and they're not, I mean, they're just trying to see what they get away with. Well, I don't know if you remember, but there was also another incident about a company commander from the Grunts stopping the Israelis from charging his place. And the Israeli commanders said that, you know, I'm going through, and the company commander pulled his pistol, pointed at it. He said, over my dead body. Well, they made T-shirts of that all over Camp Lejeune. But initially when it happened, everybody was, oh my God, you pissed off an Israeli, heaven forbid. You know, and then President Reagan heard about it and said that the guy should get a medal. Then all of a sudden the guy was a hero. You know, but for a week before that, nobody even talked to this guy. I think it was Lima Company, and they were like the American University or something. I'm not sure exactly on that. But that was during our time when we were there, and that was really, both those incidents were pretty interesting, I thought. We had there was a USO show came over. The Rams cheerleaders and an actress by the name of Lydia Cornell. She was on a popular sitcom at the time and on TV, very popular. And so she came over we were attached to a company of grunts, our platoon. And she came over, we brought the tanks down and she came over, and the grunts all had this thing lined up. They were going to take her around and show her all this different stuff. And she goes, oh no, she goes, I want a picture with the tank guys. So our platoon and her got a picture taken in front of our tank. Sure enough, about 10 days later, every major newspaper in the country has this photo of our platoon with Lydia Cornell, and the grunts were just livid. You know, that this was their show. They were going to, but then that night, the Ram cheerleaders came out and did a show, and it was great because whoever was in charge of the show had Marines all sitting around the stage. Each of them had an M60 machine gun, you know, and so that the Ram cheerleaders would feel like they were safe, I guess. You know, they were not in any danger, but you never know. The Italian, there was a unit of Italians, American Marines, and French. And we used to do training with the Foreign Legion guys once a week, you know, and they were really pretty good guys, you know, they were warriors, you know, and they all they talked about was wanting to fight somebody, you know, and they were like us, you know, they felt kind of pent up, and, you know, we got to let a little energy loose. So we trained together once a week, did different things, and it was really pretty cool. We had a good time with that. But that's my St. Christopher Medal story. Oh, anyway, I forgot to end that story. So after the colonel leaves with his Defense Force guys, one of my crewmen is in the tank, and he goes, "Hey, Gunny, is this your St. Christopher Medal?" And I said, "Yeah." The circle was not broken. I said, "Where did you find this?" And he showed me. Honest to God, it was exactly the same spot.
Wow.
Where I lost it in Vietnam. Yeah, really. And you could never convince me that there was not divine intervention in these two incidents, because certainly the first one in Vietnam, you know, how do you can't explain that. Maybe the Beirut thing wasn't a big deal, not really a risk, but still, my chain was fully intact. The eye on the St. Christopher Medal is completely good, and it was in the same exact spot. Is that I carry that medal with me every single day of my life until I have a friend who's a retired colonel, and I'd like to feel that I helped raise one of his kids. And when Matthew went out on his own, I told him the story of the St. Christopher Medal, and I gave it to him. And I said, this is what it did for me. See what it does for you. And so then I didn't have one. Actually, that kind of bothered me for a little bit. That's my protection.
Right.
So when we were moving we live in Texas now, Georgetown, Texas, but on the route out here from Bakersfield, California, we took a day off in Albuquerque, just for no reason, just to rest up. We're old people and we can't drive 2,000 miles. So my wife and I are walking around this little shopping place, just like Native American stuff, nothing fancy. And I found a shop that was a religious shop, and they had St. Christopher medals, but on the back they had the Marine Corps emblem. Wow. And so I bought one, and I carry that to this day. And I was asking the lady, I said, what's with having the emblem on here? She said, if you put a Marine Corps emblem on anything you sell, somebody will buy it. Yeah. Okay, I support that. It's pretty good. But getting back to Vietnam a little bit, there is a little humor along the way. Each time I had 2 office hours in Vietnam for the most ridiculous things you never heard of. And of course, I was always found not guilty because I didn't do it. But one of them was I got a speeding ticket in my tank. At Dong Ha.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, can you believe this? Yeah, and we're at Dong Ha. We were for services. Well, one of the things you do after services, you go out and test drive it, make sure everything's working. Well, there's a road out behind. It wasn't even on the camp. It was like right out in front of the perimeter. So we're going along there, whatever, 25, 30 miles an hour. And all of a sudden, this MP in a Jeep pulls right in front of me, like a highway patrolman or something out on the road. And we stop, and I said, what is that? What's up with this? He goes, let me see your license. Well, in those days, we didn't have licenses. There's no such thing. I said, you're out of your mind. So he writes me a speeding ticket, doing 25 and a 20, or something like that. Just the most insane thing you'd ever seen. So I immediately go back to the CP and I tell the first sergeant who was on his 3rd tour in Vietnam. He was a grunt, like 6'6", big handlebar mustache, greatest guy you ever want to meet. So we said, okay, the company commander I had at that time was a little different. We'll just leave it at that. But he wanted me, he was giving me office hours. And we started about 9 o'clock at night. And halfway through my office hours, the North Vietnamese hit the perimeter. So we all ran out, got on our tanks, drove out to where the fight was, fought all night long, came in at sunup when it was over, and we continued the friggin' office hours, And we get to the end, and finally the first sergeant intervenes, said, we shouldn't be doing this. And the CO says, okay, fine, case dismissed. And that was that. Well, then the other time, yeah, really. We're just about at the end of the war, pretty much. And we had pulled into Quang Tri. And my gunny, my new platoon sergeant, my gunny says, I want you to take that tank over there. It wasn't even ours. Take it up to Dong Ha, to battalion maintenance, and just drop it off. They're waiting for it. They're going to do some work on it. I said, okay. So me and my crew, we go up there and we pulled in, and I went over, told the maintenance chief, here's this tank, whatever. And then we hitchhiked back. Well, the time I got back, the CO, again, same CO, is just throwing a fit. He said, because the maintenance chief is writing you up because you didn't do an after operations check. And I said, okay, whatever, I just, Gunny told me to go up and drop it off, so I did. And so he said, well, he said you had like 37 loose lug nuts on your wheel. And about that time, my platoon sergeant come back because he went up to check it. He said, no, there's one loose lug nut on the tank. That's it. There's nothing wrong. We didn't do anything wrong. So again, here we are at office hours one more time, for the most ridiculous thing. And my first sergeant, being the guy that he is, said, Captain, we're not doing this. It's stupid. And they just threw out the charges. But I want to tell you another story about my first sergeant. This guy was the ultimate warrior. There could not possibly, he could fight next to Chesty Puller and Dan Daly, John Basselon, any of them. And I regret that I can't think of his name. But he was like 6'6", big handlebar mustache, a grunt on his third tour. Well, we were out along one of the rivers that led from Dong Ha out to the ocean. And it was time for me to extend my tour, and I was going to go home on leave. And the rules were you could either go home 3 months early from your rotation date or 1 month later. Well, I wanted to go, my rotation date was in November, and I wanted to go home in October. So I got my orders. I get to Okinawa, and I lost my orders. I couldn't find them. So this warrant officer says, well, so we're going to have to send you back. So I'm begging and pleading, don't put me in the brig, call them up, let them verify that, I'm not UA. And they said, no, you got to go. So I go down and I get back, and I go back to my company, and they said, well, we don't really have, I gave your tank to another guy, another Marine, so I don't really have anything for you. So at the battalion level, the Master Gunnery comes out of S3, he goes, why don't you go down there where that flag is and go in there and tell them who you are. I said, okay. So I go down there. It's friggin' 9th Marine Regiment headquarters. So he goes back and said, okay, you'll be a squad leader in the grunts until your orders come through. I said, guys, I'm a tank guy. I don't know how to be a squad leader. So what they did was they put me back out on the river where my company was. And my job was to go out. I had a squad, different people every night. One night I'd have the armor and the cook and the admin chief and somebody. There'd be like 5 of us. Next night I'd have the motor T guy and so on and so forth. And I would go out patrolling, looking for North Vietnamese infiltrating, because this was like a major infiltration route to the south. And so we're going out there, and what we would do is my first sergeant would take out the daytime patrol, and I would go with him, and he would teach me how to patrol. And we'd go through and all this different stuff. And, and then one day I asked him, I said, so what if we run into somebody, what's the plan here? He goes, I said, it's going to be kind of hard at 2 a.m. It's raining. We're getting shot at. For me to call in artillery. So we set up we set up checkpoints, and like checkpoint 1, I would just call the first sergeant back at the COC and say checkpoint 1 north 100 meters, west 50 meters, and then he would call it in like that. It was perfect. We called in artillery all the time, and so we got to a place where we actually found the infiltrators one night. And the first sergeant had told me, if you see them, just kind of observe them for a while and see what they do before you kill them. And we said, okay. So what they did is they came up to a point, like a tombstone, let's say, and they would have a blue flashlight, and they would flash 1 flash or 2 flashes. And then you look over to the side and you see a guy coming up out of a tunnel, and he would give the okay sign or the stay where you are sign. So this was at night, so you didn't really know what the size of the unit was. So we did this for like 2 weeks, and the first sergeant said, okay, we got their code, like 1 light means come ahead, 2 lights means stay where you are. Mm-hmm. So he said, what we're going to do is you are going to get between the 2 lights. And when the first guy says, okay, we're here, you give them the go ahead. And when they come walking up, kill them all. Mm-hmm. I said, well, okay, that's a good plan. So the 4 of us go out. Sure enough, a couple nights later, there they are. We see the light. So we set ourselves up and we give them the signal to come ahead. Well, it's not 2 or 3 guys. It's a whole friggin' platoon. So we're in this firefight, and it's getting ugly. So I'm calling back the checkpoints for artillery. And the rounds are landing like a mile away. And we've done this many times before. And the enemy's getting closer and closer. We're not getting the artillery support we need. And we're way outnumbered. And so we kind of moved over to a different position. Then all of a sudden, one of the camps on the river starts shooting at us, our camps. Starts shooting at us with the recoilless rifles and sending in artillery, and we're getting it from both ends. So I just told my guys, we're out of here, So we get back, and then I go up to COC, and the CO is in running this thing now. First sergeant had gone to bed. So I went over, I said, I'm calling in this artillery, and it's not landing anywhere near. And the CO says, well, I didn't think you really knew where you were. So I gave different coordinates.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, and also I asked, why are our own guys shooting at us? They said, well, we forgot to notify them that you were going to be out. So they probably thought you were the enemy. So then the XO comes over and he goes, do you think anybody heard you coming in? I said, only people within 50-mile radius, He said, well, I want you to go back out. And I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, no, he says, go back out there and see what you can find. And I'm knowing, I've been in Vietnam long enough to know, they're just sitting there waiting for us. So we went out about 50 meters, found one of these tombstones, just sat behind a tomb and called in all these checkpoints that we were supposedly supposed to be making. And then about 5 in the morning, we came back in, told the XO, we just couldn't find anybody. They all must have left, It was insane, absolutely insane the way that operation went. But, if the first sergeant just had been awake, it wasn't his fault. Right. Then we really would have had a good operation because the people down that river would have been notified it was us. And secondly is we would have had the artillery support that we needed for the 4 of us to take on a friggin' North Vietnamese platoon in the middle of a rice paddy with no cover. Good thing I was young and dumb because that doesn't make any sense to me. So anyway, finally, 3 months later, my orders come down, and I'm sure they did this just to make me suffer, and I got to go home. And I was actually got to be home for Christmas and New Year's. So it turned out all was good in the end, but it certainly was a hard road to hoe to get there. And I went back, did my last 6 months, and really incident free pretty much for that, because things were turned over to the South Vietnamese at that time. And we would just go along kind of as support, just to, hold their hand and make them feel good about everything. But they would not enter the DMZ. Now, when you live at the DMZ and you refuse to cross that line into the DMZ, you're not going to get much combat effectiveness. It just doesn't make any sense. Right. And that's just the way that worked out. But, then I rotated and I became a tank commander at tank school, which at the time was at Camp Pendleton, Camp Delmar. So we literally, our tank park was right on the beach. Some of the guys would go surfing at lunchtime. You just couldn't ask for a better way to end your tour. And then I got there in August of '69, and my EAS was in June of '70. Well, about February, they came out and said, we're giving you early outs for everybody who went. Now, the grunts, when they came back to say, if they had less than a year to do, they let them go. Because the Marine Corps at that time, if I'm not mistaken, had like 600,000 people in it. It was just huge. Wow. And as the war was winding down, there's no place for them to go. Right. Yeah. And so now I may be off on my numbers, but I'm pretty sure I'm reasonably close. But, so yeah, we all said, yeah, I never intended to stay in. I had no beef with the Marine Corps. I loved it. But my goal of my life, I was convinced that the Raiders would never win another game if I wasn't on the team. And so I got out to go to college, play football, and become a Raider, and that's that. Well, I learned quickly that the Raiders will do fine without me. And I learned I played 2 years of college football, but then at junior college, but no major college was looking for 5'10" defensive lineman. So I coincidentally, at about the same time, I ran out of money. And so I just decided I'm going to go back in. And so I went to Quantico. And when I went back in, they were really good about it. They gave me all the benefits of re-enlisting except the money. We'll give you any duty station you want, make you any MOS you want, whatever. You don't get the money. So I wanted to go on a drill field. I wanted to be a drill instructor. That's what I wanted to do. And so my recruiter told me, he said, why don't you just go back to the fleet and kind of get used to being back in. And then, in 6 months or so, then volunteer to go. I said, that's a good idea. So I went to Quantico, and they had a Templeton there at the time. And a few months later, I went to the DI screening board, and I got selected to go to Parris Island. But I'm getting a little ahead of let me back up a little bit. When I was out, I wanted to be a coach. I was going to play football and eventually end up coaching. Well, the coaches in my area were not getting jobs. Teachers, high school teachers. There were just too many people. So I just said, okay, law enforcement is going to be my thing. This is what I'll do. So I sent out applications to every major law enforcement in the country. I mean, Chicago, New York City, LA, San Francisco, Oakland, New York City. New York City was the only one that really responded. And but I went to Oakland to take my physical, and I failed the physical because in those days, in 1972, a police officer had to be 20/20 without glasses. Okay. You could not wear glasses at the time. And so, I mean, I was like 2,200 or something, but I just refused to wear glasses. So I could not get a job. I didn't, I went through a couple of years, I had 5 semesters of college, and I really, this is what I wanted to do. And so I did, that didn't work out. So that helped the process of why I went back in the Marine Corps. This guy, I wasn't going to get a job coaching. I couldn't pass the physical to be a police officer. But anyway, that got me back in the Marine Corps. And then I went to Parris Island, and honest to goodness, I found a home. DI school, to me, the day I set foot in there was the most comfortable, happy feeling ever, because I'd heard how hard it was. Right. But you broke it down into squads. And my squad advisor's name was Gunny Fish. He retired as Sergeant Major, a Force Recon guy, just an awesome instructor, awesome. And one of the other instructors, I can't remember his name, but he was General Gray's Sergeant Major in the Marine Corps. Okay. Well, he was an instructor also at DI at the time. And he was the best guy you'd ever want to meet. He never got mad at anybody, but there was a drill instructor that I tried to model myself after. He was in 3rd Battalion. His name was Gunnery Sergeant. And he came to our class to talk. And he's one of these guys that ran like a 3 miles in like 10 minutes, but he could bench press 300 pounds. He played middle linebacker on our football team there. And he was just buffed, and he looked the part. I mean, this guy would scare you to death if you saw him at the mall. Mm-hmm. And so he's up talking, and somebody asked him, have you ever been investigated for any crime, against the privates or whatever? He said, oh yeah. He said, I was attacked by 2 privates one night. I was walking between the barracks and late at night, and 2 privates jumped me. And he said, I hit the first one and I cracked his skull. And he said, and the second one fainted. The guy fainted. Yeah. And so Gunny Sergeant he played on our football team. He was the middle linebacker. So I kind of got to know him a little bit. And he retired as a sergeant major up in Vallejo at the special ops school or whatever. And he was a helicopter guy, crew chief. But man, I'll tell you, that guy, he was the epitome of what a drill instructor should be like. There was a book written called Maggot that's about boot camp or whatever, and he was on the cover. He was it was a drawing of a drill instructor, and it was him. He had posed for that thing, and it was really awesome. But at Parris Island, I really met a lot of really good people. There was when you serve with other drill instructors, it's like serving in combat. When you're in combat, you find out really fast who the players are and who the players aren't. And you can weed them out. Well, on the drill field, it's the same way. Because at that time we were picking up platoons of 100 people, and there were only 3 drill instructors. And you better have your act wired and be ready to roll, or you're just not gonna make it. That's just the way it is. Because you think being a recruit is hard, be a drill instructor, and that is hard. And you have to learn so much of time management, because you have so many things that they have to learn. And privates don't learn much when you're yelling at them all the time. You got to learn to be a teacher. And you got to teach quickly, because there's a lot of things you got to cover. And your fitness report is going to be evaluated by how well your platoon does. So you learn so much. In the development of a Marine warrior, I always send people to the drill field, always. Because my thought has always been, you're a warrior. If you go on recruiting duty, when you come back, how does that make you a better warrior? I suppose you could probably build a case for some things, and recruiters are necessary. I'm not anti-recruiter. But if you're a warrior and you go to drill field, when you come back, you are twice the warrior, because you learn. Because if you're thrown out in the swamp and you either sink or swim, and there's a lot of sharks out of that water, and you better have your act together with dealing with 100 recruits that you have to maintain absolute perfect control of, but yet you got to teach them, and you got to speak language that they understand. And you got to be able to let that private come to you and talk to you about things, which they do later on, but not so much in the beginning. Because when you pick them up in first phase, it's a lot of shock. It's shock and awe to the max. But anyway, you learn really quick. And I served with some really good drill instructors. One of my friends, everybody has a nickname, my friend's his last name was Hunt. And everybody called him Horrible Hunt. Because when it's time to be ruthless and hard and mean, and we all got it in us. You just got to get it out. Well, Horrible was really good at that aspect. Interestingly, because he came to the drill field a corporal, and he left the gunny 3 years later, because you could get promoted that fast.
Wow.
On the drill field. Yeah, and he was that good. He deserved everything he got. And he retired a Master Gunny. He went to Syria on embassy duty for a while, and his son was like 2 years old, had diarrhea and was sick, and he ended up being sent home because they didn't have the medical facilities for him in Syria. But anyway, after he retired, he wanted to be an electrician, so he learned that, and he was hired at the local high school, White Oak High School, and he became a soccer coach. He'd never seen a soccer game in his life, but while he was there, he ended up winning the state championship for their high school. And after he retired from that, the soccer team was gone somewhere on New Year's Day, and the coach called up and said, "Hey, we forgot to bring something with us. Would you get it and drive it up here to us?" And of course he did. And on New Year's Day, he's driving through the North Carolina, through the back roads, and a logging truck came towards him and didn't see him. And they had a head-on collision with his Bronco and a logging truck full of logs. And Tom didn't make it. That was a very, if you think life is fair, you're wrong. Because Tom is a guy that should have been there forever. He came from Youngstown, Ohio, where he was a biker, a hoodlum, fights every week, becoming a guy who becomes a soccer coach at White Oak High School. retires a master gunner. He gets killed out there by a tree. It was terrible, absolutely just terrible. But, other people that I met on the drill field, I've remained friends with them, probably even more so than the tanker guys, just for whatever reason. But one of the people actually two of the people that really I think it helped me a lot was our football coach. The head coach was named Ray Pace. He was a major, and he was the battalion XO of 2nd Battalion, of which I was part of. And he played at Texas A&M. And he's the closest thing to Bear Bryant you're ever going to see. He's a big guy, growl, harsh voice, and he and I just connected. And over the years, we became very good friends, and I learned just by hanging out with him. I learned an awful lot. Well, one of our assistant coaches was Lieutenant Sherrill, who was a tanker, and he retired a lieutenant colonel. And I learned about X's and O's from him, and I learned how to practice from our head coach. And when I got into coaching, I found myself doing exactly the exact same things that those two coaches taught me. And while we're on the subject of coaches, I forgot to mention one guy. In high school, the line coach that coached me was a Marine tank commander on Iwo Jima.
Oh, wow.
Talk about a coincidence.
Right.
Yeah, and he was a guy that when I got out, when I was in college, I'd go over to his house all the time just to talk to him and get advice on how to play and whatever. It was really good. But anyway, at Paris Island, our football team was really good. And it was because we had such great coaches and we had some decent players. But, when you're a drill instructor and you've got to work all day, you PT every day, you don't get out of PT just because you're on the football team.
Right.
So you're working hard, and then like at 1800 practice starts, but Major Pace was I kind of love that guy. He was, we had a day, when it rains, which it does a lot in South Carolina, the grass is real slippery. So the way we would practice is we do about 2 minutes of warm up, and then Lieutenant Sherrill would take the quarterbacks and running backs and go down there and run plays, come back in an hour. And Major Pace would take the linemen and put us in the pit. It was just banging heads one time, all for an hour. And then we'd come together as a team and run some plays, but that's Marine football. Marine football is man football. There's no sissies out there that play Marine football. I mean, it's just hard. No perks, no cheerleaders, no band, just guys that love to fight, just get in the pit and get after it. Well, one day it had been raining, and the major had us lined up 10 yards apart. And he'd blow the whistle and you'd run at each other at full speed and just hit each other as hard as you could. Well, as I was extending my block, I slipped because the grass was wet and my head came up. And the guy I was hitting threw his forearm right in my face. And he knocked 3 of my front teeth out, but they weren't completely out. They were just kind of broken in half. So after practice, of course, you don't leave practice, but after practice, the Major Pace sent me to the dentist, and I had nerve exposed, hanging out of my tooth. And at sick bay, the doctor said, "Well, the dentist isn't here till tomorrow, so come back in the morning." And I'm in screaming pain. So I go home, and my wife had tacos made that night for dinner. So with this nerve hanging out, I ate tacos. Wow. Went to bed, slept about 20 minutes. Yeah, and then went to the dentist the next day, and he gave me a root canal and did all that and fixed me up and gave me a no PT chip for 24 hours. Well, we had a game that night, so and we're hitting like this the day before a game. That's the way Marine football should be. So I took my chit over to the XO, Major Pace. I said, I got this all taken care of, and he gave me this chit. Major just jumps up. He's like 250 pounds. He was an offensive lineman at A&M. Just wads up my chit, throws it in a trash can. He said, "I don't want to hear nothing about no chit." He said, "You be on that field or turn in your gear." So I said, "Okay, I'm good." And so I played that night. But man, I'll tell you, it was an experience. That's good. But I had another run-in with him that I look back on now that was just so funny. We were at Elliot's Beach at Paris Island, which means you're out in the field, and it was wintertime. It was cold and raining, whatever. And we had a game one night. So a serious gunny told me, you can leave like at 1800 or whatever. So I went in and got back to my barracks and in my office, and I'm changing clothes. And this had the heater on, and I laid down for a minute. I fell asleep. So I woke up, and I threw on my gear and I ran to the stadium, and it was like halfway through, just the start of the second quarter. So I missed the whole first quarter. I run up to Major Pace. I say, Coach, I said, I'm here. And he just looks at me and he just winds up and punches me right straight in the face. I had my face mask on, so it wasn't a big deal. He said, get your ass in there and play. And I did. And he never said another word about it. That was that. But, it's just a great story, about real men. And that's one of the things I like about tanks is you're just surrounded by real men. I guess probably now we have women in there too. And if they can do the job, I'm happy for them. But I'm just going to say men. But, and certainly at Paris Island, Major Pace and Lieutenant Sherrill and a lot of the guys I played with, these guys were real men. I mean, because being a drill instructor is a hard job. You're not just physically trained, but you're mentally trained. Then you play a game on Wednesday night, and Thursday morning you're out running PT on a 4-mile run. That's just life. We had a day. One of my goals when I was a drill instructor, I wanted to work at Motivation Platoon, which was a platoon set up for the absolutely most horrible attitude privates you ever met. And we had no training. Our mission statement was make life so miserable for them that they will do anything to stay back in training. And we were really good at our job. And Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they had the moat hike. And we would take a hike around Paris Island, we got to Elliot's Beach around, and it was about 10 miles every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We'd end up at the flagpole, and salute the flag when the flag goes up and whatever, and then hike back. Well, we had a hike on game day, so I did my 10-mile hump. And then that night I went out there and played. Then the next day, Lieutenant Sherrill was the XO of Special Training Branch, was where Moat was. So he comes to me and says, did you go on a hike yesterday? And I said, of course. And then you played the game at night. He said, when that comes up, tell me. You don't have to do that on game day. That's great. The day after the game, you tell me that. But it was just a thing, and I never thought anything of it. It's just, that's just the way life is. I don't know one person who joined the Marine Corps who was looking for an easy way out. The Marine Corps is a hard life. It's a tough life. It's not for everybody. But, football is something you do on your off time. You don't get sent TAD to the football team. You don't get special privileges. You play on your time. And when I was at Paris Island and at Second Tanks, you played games at night. So it didn't interfere with work, and when you're out there humping every day, doing all that you do with the privates, and you just wish you could just go home, no, put on your gear, game day, suit up and get out there and let's play. And don't even think anything of it. And don't ever even think about the idea of complaining. My goodness, a fate worse than death. A sissy on a Marine football team. That's just incredible. So
I said all these stories have a common theme, and listening to you kind of go through these, the theme that I'm pulling out is warrior, and you keep circling back to it. And from the time that you were in Vietnam, and then again in Beirut, and then on the island, you circle back to what a Marine is, and the Marine warrior aspect of it. When you were in the Gulf War, the notes here say you were a tank leader. So obviously you weren't on your tanks. However, you were responsible for a company of tanks. From the time from Vietnam up to the Gulf War, did that warrior ethos remain? Did those Marines perform the same as you remember?
It does, but you got to bring it out of people. Nobody in their right mind, a normal civilian, wakes up in the morning and says, I'm ready to kick somebody's ass today. But Marines do, and there's a lot of ways that you can bring that out in Marines. And one of the things that's so important is sports. And a lot of people say, well, we're not here to play football or whatever, but you do it on your own time. I used to practice at Camp Pendleton when I coached first tanks. We practiced at 6 a.m. There's nobody that can complain about that except the players. And when you talk about it, and Marine football to me is just the epitome. I mean, Dick Butkus would love Marine football. The guys that really want to hit you, and just rip your face off. Those are the guys who play Marine football. There's no perks. There's no fancy anything. It's just, in fact, our field at first tanks was like cement. You fall on that, you might as well play in a parking lot. But I never heard anybody complain. In fact, I'll tell you a story about a guy, he retired as a gunny. But when he was with me, he was a Sergeant Moody. And Moody had been with me at Camp Lejeune, and he'd come out to Camp Pendleton, and they have those sunglasses things you put across your face mask, to keep so the sun doesn't bother you. Well, we had bought a bunch of those, and Moody had put his on backwards so that the loops that hold it in there the sticker part is supposed to stick out. Well, his were sticking in. And so we're in the pit, we're banging heads, and all of a sudden Moody comes over and he said, Top, he said, got a problem. I said, shut up, Moody, we're working here, get in the drill. He says, okay. He jumps into the drill, banging the heads, da-da-da. And finally that period is over, we're moving to the next period. He goes, Coach, I got a little problem. I said, Moody, stop whining, what's your problem? And he takes off his helmet and his face is covered with blood. And he said, I put these on wrong because every time I hit, I get poked in the face by these, like Bob, whatever. I said, Moody, you're my guy. I got to tell you. Go up to sick bay and let the doc take over. So he comes back about 20 minutes later, bandaged up everywhere with his helmet on. He said, okay, so I'm ready to go back in. What do you want me to do? How do you not love those guys? Marine football is one tool that you can use to train guys as warriors, and they don't even know it. But like me being a tank leader, or many times majors would be our coaches. When does a lance corporal get to spend an hour a day with a major? Maybe not talking about Marine stuff, but just interacting like a coach and a player, or hang out with the top for a couple hours every day. Doing things like that. It's a constant. It's a, what do you call it? A constant. It's not a consequence, but it's a plus that you didn't really figure on. You don't think of developing warriors on the football field. Right. But I would tell my guys, and I believe this as a player. I played for 20 years, high school, college, and then Marine Corps, and I truly believe that the way you play football is going to be the way you fight on the battlefield. If you're always looking, if you take an easy way out, you don't give a guy a good block, or the guy in front of you is kicking your ass, and you just kind of roll over and find another way to do it. That's what you're going to do on the battlefield. But if you man up, you get out there and line up toe to toe, and just get after it, then that's the way you're going to fight. And without them realizing that, they're learning the warrior ethos, and they understand. You play with pain, guys. And I'll give you an example. I've never told this story to one person, but I'll tell you, it's important now. I feel like, honestly, like I'm on the edge of a cliff at the Grand Canyon, and the ground is coming out from under me. What's the last thing I want to say before I fall off the cliff? That's kind of the way I feel with us doing away with tanks and all. But we'll get to that. You made the analogy of being at the Grand Canyon with the ground crumbling underneath you. Oh, okay. And I think that's a really good analogy, because I got it now. But we're getting. You see on TV that Saddam had attacked Kuwait, so we knew something's going to happen. So we got ready to mount out. We loaded up, but we didn't know when. So I'm over at Top Roden's house. eating dinner, and his wife makes the best lasagna and garlic bread anywhere on the face of the earth. So we're over at the top Roden's house, and we get a call and says, he'd be at the barracks at 06 in the morning. So we hang up the phone, and between he and I, we said, okay, it's probably just a drill. We don't want to go. And so anyway, the next morning, we get the call. This is the real deal. At 10 o'clock, the bus leaves. We're going to El Toro. I was on the advanced party, so there's 10 of us. Well, to back up a little bit, to lay the groundwork for this story, for a year prior to us deploying, I was really incapacitated with migraine headaches. And they were not diagnosed at the time. But if I laid down flat on the bed, I was okay. But if I sat up, I was just barfing everything everywhere. This went on for years. Like I had a knife stuck in the side of my head for a year. Wow. And it was horrible. I mean, literally horrible. I couldn't see, my doctors really were not doing a thing for me. But when I saw on TV that the war was getting ready to start, I really thought, I just don't know if I can do this. I'm medically, I am in bad shape. But then I thought, can you really live with yourself if your guys go off to war and you don't go with them? And that really bothered me a lot. And so when we're sitting at El Toro at the terminal, just the advance party, me and Gunny Murillo and a couple of the other guys, I literally had tears running down my face because I said, I just don't know if I can do this. And I thought, you just got to man up. You got to make it happen. It's not for me. It has nothing to do with me. This is for my guys. And I truly had guys that I really liked that were in my company. We get out there and then we get over, get on a plane and we take off, and we landed in Spain and changed planes or something. And anyway, so we land in Kuwait, assuming we're landing at an airport. I mean, it's just a thought. We get off the plane and I look around and there isn't a thing in sight. And I turn around and look, and there goes the plane taking off again. And me and my guys, and we saw there's a little tent over under a coconut tree somewhere. And I walk over, and that was the air traffic control guys. So he said, I think we're at the wrong spot. The guy says, man, you're way off target. There's no tanks anywhere around here. So what do you do when you want to know what's going on with the Marines? Ask a civilian. So a bus driver was driving a bus. He was coming by me, flagged him down. And probably the only words he knew in English was tanks. And he goes, yeah, his waiters come out. I know where the tanks are. Sure enough, we drove like 2 hours down to whatever the port was. We got off, and there was the tanks, But so we get there, and we leave California. When we left California, a typical summer day in August, it was overcast, 70 degrees, whatever. Well, we land in Kuwait, it's like 110 degrees in August, about 90% humidity. Well, I'll tell you, that was a kind of shock. So we get suited up here and getting taken care of. With the vest party, we got we fighting on the MPF ships. So we unloaded all the tanks off of the ships, the whole battalion, and waited for the main body to show up. When the main body got on, and we headed north, and honest to God, our company was attached to a task force, and I can't remember the infantry battalion we were with, but we were separate from the battalion. And I didn't see a building for 4 months. We were so far out in the desert in the summertime. I mean, it's hot and it's humid, and life sucks. But my guys are just finding ways to make things happen. I had told my company commander before we left, that while we're waiting for the war to start, we're not going to be training every minute. We need things that the troops can blow off steam. So that, they're going to be set a watch every night. They're going to be out in the field. it can't be just work and then expect them 6 months from now to be ready to fight at 100%. So I loaded up some footballs, some ball gloves and bats, different special services stuff, but we didn't take any weights. I took 2 dumbbells, that was it. And we got over there, we made some, took some fence posts and waste baskets and filled them with cement. And we had like a 220-pound bar, a 260 bar that we could bench. And one of our guys made a bench out of some wood. So we had recreation. And our CO was really good about this because we were on the beach, on the coastal side. And every Sunday, we'd go down to the beach and we'd have like a beach party. Well, one of my football players was Todd Johnson, who worked in our mess hall. Well, in the Gulf, he was responsible for feeding the whole division. And every night, the supply people would go down and pick up chow and bring it up in the morning so we could have breakfast. Breakfast and evening meal were hot chow. So I went down one day and I asked Top, I said, how about some party rats? What do you guys? Oh, man. And Todd Johnson was a great guy, even though he's a cook, just a great guy. And he said, yeah. I said, yeah, whatever you want. And he said, he starts pulling out hamburger patties and things of cheese and buns. And I said, so how often can we do this? He said, how often you want? I said, every Sunday. He said, okay. So every Sunday for like months, Todd Johnson, he was a big guy. He's from Chicago, played semi-pro football, and he was one of our guards. He would send us out more chow than we could ever freaking eat. And so then for some reason, I'm trying Aramco oil company. They were the big oil people in Saudi, Arab American oil or something, but they were Aramco. Well, this one couple, husband and wife, who had been there for like 20 years, they found us and they kind of adopted us. And every Sunday they would come out, and join our beach party. And they would eventually, they made, these are all engineers and stuff. So they made like a boiler so you could boil onion rings and stuff, And they made a pizza machine where you could make pizzas. I mean, these guys were great, and I asked them one, and this went on for months. It was like a 6-hour drive from where they were to us, and then 6 hours back at the end of the day, and then go to work the next day. And so I asked them, I said, I'd like to have the address of the president of your company. I want to tell them how good you guys have done. And he said, oh no, he said, our company said, don't even talk to the Marines there. He said, we don't want you to associate with anybody because of the terrorist threat, obviously. But these people just kept coming every weekend. It was great. Just to talk to a real person that was not a member of our company was a good thing. But, you were talking about the warrior spirit. And I'm going to tell you about some guys that you're just not going to believe. Just in my own mind, I have a file where I put special guys, special Marines. And I'm going to tell you about guys that just you wouldn't believe. One of the tank leaders of our battalion was Top Hazlitt. Top Hazlitt and I were on the drill field together. And I think he played linebacker at University of Florida, but just total committed, tough guy, really hardcore. Well, he had been injured in his life and throughout his career. And one morning in the Gulf, right before the war started, he couldn't get out of his sleeping bag one morning because his back hurt so bad. So they took him down to the hospital and they said, "I'm going to send you home." So he's sitting at the airport waiting for a plane to go home. What does he do? He escapes. He hitchhikes back to his unit. Wow. So he could be there when we cross the line of departure. That's a man. That is a man. We had another guy, Top McPike. He was one of the tank leaders. He was a Vietnam veteran, I think, but he was the guy you could always count on. If you're out tank leading, looking around for trying to find stuff, just go find Top McPike. He's probably already got it. Because we had to paint the tanks. Because the tanks were either cabin, I think they were green, and so we had to find some paint over them so they would blend into the desert a little bit. Well, where do you go? Find Top McPike. He's got it. He got me a tent from a Bedouin. He traded him a case of sea rations, and so me and the first sergeant and Betty Rice slept in this Bedouin tent. you know, and then one of the troops had written on the front door of the tent, "Hey guys, you know, that's what makes Marines, is guys like, you know, Top Hazlitt, Top McPike, put them in the file. They deserve it, you know." And our guys, some of my guys, and I didn't know this till afterwards, but, you know, the ramming staff where you clean the gun tube, they were jousting with that thing. They get two crews, get down, one guy would hold the other one on his back. They'd each have their flak jacket and their helmet on, and they'd be jousting with the ramming staffs. You know, Marines just adapt. They'll find a way to make something good out of something bad, you know, and it all worked out really good. And one of the greatest moments in my life was when the war was over, and we, First Sergeant Matkin was our first sergeant, great guy. He's a 400-pound bench presser, so we had a really good setup between he and I. And so we're on the plane. You know, when we're waiting to go home, every night the CO would come back, and we'd say, "Well, do we have a flight date?" And he'd say, "Well, 7 to 10 days." Next night, 7 to 10 days. On and on. You're losing your mind. You just want to go home. It's enough of this.
Right.
And so finally the day comes, and you've gotten so desert hardened, you really don't believe it. Yeah, there's a trick. You know, they're gonna take off, they're gonna land at some other airport, say, guys, get off there and mount on your tanks." And we weren't buying in. So plane takes off, and just as it comes up off the ground, PepsiCo had made a video of all the things we had missed during the time we were gone. And just as the plane took off, Whitney Houston is singing the national anthem at the Super Bowl. And I'm telling you, there was not a dry eye on that plane. It was just the most incredible moment. And First Sergeant Matkin and I just looked at each other and we said, "You know what? We're leaving with all the people we came with." That's the victory for us,
Right.
you know? And it was, I mean, just bringing everybody home. Now, we had sent people home who got injured. And I'll tell you a story about that. I'd love to tell this story, but you know, people had gotten injured in training, and so we'd send them home, but they'd all come back. Well, one morning we're out playing football, and one of our lieutenants lines up in front of me, and he says words to the effect of, you know, "Okay, old man, I'm going to kick your ass. Football player days are done." So we hit, and I broke his arm in 3 places. And so he didn't know it was broken. He was in a lot of pain. So he's sitting over in my Jeep, in my Humvee. And so my driver, Corporal Stevens, walks over and says, "So, Lieutenant, you going to mess with Top anymore? You going to give him?" And so he finally went to the thing, and he got medevaced home. But he came back. But he didn't come back to our company. He ended up being a TOW platoon commander. Lieutenant Wright was his name. Really good officer. I liked him a lot. But I didn't have any regrets breaking his arm. That was okay, you know. But he talked trash, he got the price. But he came back and he fought and he did his thing. And that kind of, and we had a number of people like that. You know, and just in my own thoughts, I was thinking that, you know, I'm hating every day. You know, I'm really sick, but I'm glad I came. And I thought a lot, and I've thought a lot about since then, is how could you possibly let your Marines go to war and you not go with them? I mean, I honestly, I don't think I could have lived with myself. You know, if you live the life of a warrior, you join the Marine Corps, you know, you do all the things you got to do. You go to the field, you go on float, you go on UDP, you know, you do all the things. And then the war starts and you run for the hills and your men go to war. You know, I don't know what to say, but I was very happy with my own decision, even though, and the first sergeant told me that there were many days he didn't think I was going to make it, you know, and so whatever effect it had on me, you know, I tried to keep it to myself, but, well, I'll tell you, that was some hard day. We were there 8 months, and I'll tell you, every day I was hating life, but I was there for my guys, and I'll take that with me to the grave. I didn't let my guys down, you know, because I know they would have never forgiven me anyway. So, but you know, we had such great people in our company there at Pendleton. One of them became a police chief in New Jersey. Another one became a fire captain in Montclair, New Jersey, a captain on fire department. Others have done very well in business. We have numerous sergeant majors and master gunnies that have come through our company there at Pendleton. And it would be foolish to say that these people are successful because of anything that I did. So you can't say, I train these guys, that's why they're who they are. That's ridiculous. But just to know that maybe just that little bit of influence might have helped these people along in their life. It's a very satisfying feeling, and to know that maybe perhaps you might have made a difference in somebody's life. That's a good feeling, and if you really thought about it, there'd probably be times where you've let people down or whatever. Nobody's perfect. I would certainly never claim that every decision I ever made was right, but you learn, and the people that I kind of take issue with is you got to do things. You got to go on float. You got to go on UDP. You got to go to Caxus. And if you make mistakes, you learn from them. If you're not doing those things, you don't learn. You can't hide out back in S4 somewhere, doing some ridiculous thing. You got to put your neck out there and get it stepped on a few times, because that makes you better. And that is the point, not to get to your 30 years and have a nice retirement, because at 30 years, you don't get very much money anyway. Thank God for the VA and disability. That's all I can say. But if you're in it for the money, you're in the wrong business. The travel and all that may be great, but you're on a Navy ship and you're sleeping with 50 guys in your quarters. It's really not that much fun. But the landing on the beach, I'm the most seasick person you ever met in your life. I get seasick taking a shower, but the Navy guys tell me that the tides are different. On the West Coast, I never get seasick, ever. And I've been through tornadoes, typhoons, whatever you call them, in the Straits of Taiwan. But on the East Coast, when I get on a boat at Morehead City, I'm puking my guts out before we ever get out to the ship. And every time I'm asking myself, why am I doing this? Right. And then when you're making a landing somewhere, you're out there doing your circles, and you're breathing diesel fuel at 3 a.m, going up and down.
Right.
Why am I doing this? But you keep doing it. Mm-hmm. There were many times when I would tell myself, I'm getting too old to play football. I don't want to play anymore. But then comes August, and there go your feet, walking out there to get your gear, get out on the field. And when you live the life, it's all habit. It's a lot of the conscious thought just leaves you, because when it's time to go to CAX, you don't think about how hot it is in the desert. I don't know why, but I always seem to end up going in July and August. Mm-hmm. Every one I did. You don't think about how hot it is or what it is. You think about training. What are we going to do for our men that's going to make things better? When you go on UDP, you don't think. I have to admit, I do think, I can't believe I'm going to Camp Swamp again. Mm-hmm. I've been there so many times, but you're going. Get over it. Find a way to win. That's kind of a philosophy that I try to tell people is, no matter what, one, you got to find something good in everything, and two is play to win. You got to just find a way to win. Sometimes you line up on the football field and it looks like the other team is playing in the NFL. So what? Be quicker than they are. Be faster than them. Be smarter than them, and just line up and get after it. That's what you do. We're Marines truly, and I believe this. Marines are truly the modern samurai. With the commitment, and then we're not going to kill ourselves when we lose a battle, but we have that level of commitment. Mm-hmm. And samurai, I studied samurais a lot, and samurai means servant. Like the servants of the emperor. Well, in the Marine Corps, it's essentially you serve the Marine Corps. Marine Corps will tell us what to do and where to go. And we just do it. And whining about it, complaining about it. Tell me the positive in that. It doesn't happen. Do you miss your family? Of course you do. But so does that guy over there. Mm-hmm. And the issue I have with some people like that is, if somebody worms their way out of a float, that means somebody else has got to go in their place. And the odds are that somebody just came back. Right. And that, I've had 11 overseas tours, and I don't claim that that's the norm. but in a 30-year career, I would think probably at least 5 would be appropriate. I don't know, whatever. Everybody does their own thing, but that's just the way my mind works.
And you talked about
warriors, live the life.
Yep. You talked about warriors and the warrior ethos and what it means. You talked about teamwork and the importance of sports, but you have not talked about yourself. And what I mean by that is you mentioned what it means to be a champion and to take yourself to the next level. And during all this time, during all these deployments and playing football and the drill field and everything else that you have already so graciously told us about, you failed to mention that in 1982, you were the All-Marine Judo champion. In 1984, you participated in U.S. Olympic training for the 1984 Olympic Judo team. In 94, you attained your first World Bench Press Championship. Also in 94, you were silver medalist for the World Power Lifting Champion. In 1997, you were the World Power Lifting Champion gold medalist. And both in 2000 and 2001, you won the World Bench Press Champion. And then most recently in 2015, you set a world record and won the World Bench Press Championship gold medal with a whopping 352.5 pound bench press. So in addition to everything else, you are a living embodiment of what it means to take yourself to that next level, to win those championships and really put the steel up in the air when it comes to it. And I mean, 2015, how old were you, Master Guns?
I'm 72.
72 years old.
At that one, I think I was 68 in that meet. I was 68.
Okay, so 68 years old. Mentioned
it really is. It is the mindset. Like, for example, I started in judo when I was in junior high school, and all through high school, I belonged to 3 different dojos, and I trained 6 days a week for 6 years. And then when I came to the Marine Corps, I kind of slacked off a little bit. And when I went to the All-Marine Championship, I really hadn't been up to speed on my judo too much, but I really had an attitude, and I'm coming after you. I know what I know, and you probably know 10 times more throws than I do, but the ones I do good. Mm-hmm. And so I went and I won. And then from that point, they sent us to the Olympic Training Center in the National Training Camp, which now you're out there with Olympians. Mm-hmm. And the Mexicans had sent their Olympic team up. A coach from Russia was there as our guest coach for the 2 weeks at camp. I was way out of my league at that camp because these guys were professional athletes. But I held my own and I went on to the national championships because of the fighting spirit. Judo, you have to be smart and you have to really know what you're doing. You just can't be big and strong and fight like hell. That really doesn't, that'll get you through the first few matches, but it doesn't last long. And so the 2 weeks we're up there, I spent more time in sickbay getting stitched up, honest to God. More stitches at that training camp than I've had my whole life combined. But they put the stitches in, then the trainer would wrap me up with an ace bandage and throw me back on the mat. You're back out there again. So what are you going to do? Limp around and whine, or are you going to get in there and fight? And that's the choice you have to make. But in judo, I have never won anything because I knew more than my opponent. I won matches because I just fought harder. And that's the only reason. Now in powerlifting, of course, it's different. But when you go to a meet and you lift only against guys in your own weight class and your own age, okay? So it's a little deceiving when you see all these 6'5", 350-pound Samoans walking around benching twice what you bench. It could be a little overwhelming for the average person. But I always taught myself in lifting, especially, I'm only competing against myself. No matter what I lift, I'm not going to bench 100 pounds more today just because I'm fired up and I see a good opponent. It just doesn't work like that, And so I would set goals for myself, and I would. And one thing that I really like to do a lot is talk with the other lifters after the meet, and learn some of the things that they do, and whatever. But it all comes down to attitude on game day. You know, whether it's a football game or a powerlifting meet, a judo tournament, when it's your time, and think about it like about judo and powerlifting, that's not a team sport. That's you. You know, and in powerlifting, I've been to a number of world championships. There may be 1,000, 2,000 people in the audience, you know, and what are you going to do? You going to roll over and give up just because maybe your elbow hurts a little bit from your previous lift? No, you man up. You just kind of get all your energies up in there and make things happen. And it's just, it's satisfying in one sense. I'll tell you a different story about that last award you told me that I won. The World Bench Press Championship was in Las Vegas. But in a few months before that, at the National Championship, was where I set the world record in the bench. And the reason that's so significant to me personally is prior to that, 5 years prior to that, I had really had 2 years, I was really sick. I mean, I was bedridden, or I was in the ICU at the hospital for 2 straight years. I lost 60 pounds in 60 days. Wow. I had salmonella in my blood. I had another blood disorder. I had an aneurysm in my aorta. They put a stent in and it got infected. So what ended up happening is I spent 2 years trying to figure out what's wrong with me. You know, and I was so weak, I couldn't get out of bed. In the middle of the night, my wife would have to help me up to go outside and make a head call, you know, and the pain was just, I couldn't eat, throw up everything I ate, and it was horrible. Finally, I went to UCLA Medical Center, and I got an 18-inch incision on my stomach, and they took out the stent, which would cause the infection, and they took out all the infection. They went into my leg and took out every vein in my leg and replaced it with the artificial vein. Wow. Because I was getting no blood to my foot. And you have not experienced pain until you have no blood in your foot. Until you can't walk. You know, I couldn't walk for 2 years. And then when they were doing my stent, they had to cut through some muscle in my, along the side here. And I now have like a softball sticking out of me, like on this side over here, you know, but I don't have any pain, so I don't care what it looks like, you know, and I went through all these different, and afterwards I had to have a physical therapist teach me how to walk, because I just couldn't do it. My leg would not do what I told it to do. And then I'm still at a point now where I can't run, but I can walk a quarter mile, and I can do that, you know, but that's about it. Cardio is not in my training plan anymore. And so and when I got back in the gym, after all that, I could bench press the bar. 3 years later, I go to the national championship. I win the national championship, and I set the world record in the squat and the bench press. And then 3 or 4 months later, I win the world championship. See, and that's why, and that medal, I've got framed separately. It's in my garage. That is personal. You know, that's, you come back. You did what you did, and you made it happen, no matter how bad it was. So I've had 2 really bad periods of my life where my health was really bad. I mean, really, with the migraines, you know, and it's funny because the Camp Pendleton, the hospital, they never could diagnose why I had headaches. And when I went on I&I duty a few years later, the first guy I saw said, "Oh yeah, so you got migraines," and they give you this stuff where you inject it in your stomach, you know, and whatever, it went away. You know, and I haven't had any sense. So just, you know, I don't know what to say, but I certainly endured a lot that I don't feel like I should have had to. But I think, and when I was in the hospital in Bakersfield, the doctor had called my wife more than one time saying, "You better come in because he's not going to make it till morning." And after it was all over with, I had my doctor told me the only reason you're alive is because of your physical strength and your mental attitude, you know. And so whenever my wife gives me a hard time about working out, I say, "Wait a minute now." Like I said, the more I work out, the longer I live. So that's a good thing, you know. You know, the thing that always, I always run through my mind, you know, is you know, not just the never quit, the warrior attitude, but I think a lot about wounded warriors, you know, and Gunny Popovich is a good friend of mine, and he lost his eye. And you know, since he was medically retired, he went back to college, got a college degree. He went out and taught school for a while. He worked in the Silicon Valley for Tesla for a while, and now he drives. He has special glasses, he can drive. That is the epitome of don't feel sorry for yourself, make things happen. Right. So when I'm really having a bad time, I think about Nick a lot, you know, and also if you're ever in a hospital and you start feeling sorry for yourself, take a walk down the hall and look in some of the rooms, and you realize life isn't so bad after all. There are always people who are worse off than you, you know, and you just got to remind yourself, you know, is look for the path for success. Don't look for the path that makes things easier, because, you know, making the right choices is not always easy. I mean, you would think that, especially when you're young and hard charging, and oh yeah, you know, you come to that crossroad, I know where I'm going. Well, no, not always, because you may think you're going down the right path, but you probably not, you know. And even when you do make bad decisions, fix it, you know. And I always tell people, you know, when they say, who's in charge of your life? And they say, well, mom or dad. No, you're in charge of your life. And if you're not happy with your life, fix it. If you don't like your job, get another one. But get up off your ass and make something happen. You know, even if you fail, you can at least look in the mirror and say, well, I tried, you know, I'll try something else next time, you know. And that's the deal. It's all about attitude. You gotta, I mean, honestly, I know guys who would rather fight than eat, you know. And I'll give you a quick story, because I got 100 of them with this guy. I call him the Coke Classic guy, Sergeant Major Burnett. We're in the Gulf War, and we had on the front of each tank, we had a plow or like a blade on front of each tank, because when the Iraqis had their trenches done, we're not going to let an infantry squad slow down a tank. We're just going to lower the plow, bury him, and keep moving. So we did that. Well, Sergeant Major Burnett at the time was a staff sergeant, and I've known him since he was a PFC. I was a platoon sergeant at Camp Lejeune, and we bet on everything. I mean, anything in there. We bet one time we were on a ship, and we bet who could do the most sit-ups hanging off the side of the ship. So we're doing sit-ups, you know, when you fall in racing, you know. That's how crazy it is. We'll bet a Coke class. No, and then we say, okay, in a month we'll have a bench press contest. We'll bet a Coke class. Well, Sergeant Major Burnett owes me like 8,000 cases of Coke Classic, which I'm sure I'll never see. But yeah, we're in the Gulf, and we had our homemade weights set up, and every morning I'd get up and Staff Sergeant Burnett would come down, and we pump a little, eat our MRE, pump a little iron, you know, whatever. And we got talking and said, okay, so what are we going to bet on? And I said, well, let's bet a Coke Classic on who can kill the first Iraqi. He said, oh, yeah. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, I ride on the retriever. I said, you're on a tank. I said, I don't have to. I said, we got to kill him with your bare hands. So he said, okay, I'll take the bet. So we're the lead element for our task force that we're a part of. And we come up on these trenches with the Iraqis in them. And we practiced all along, just lower the plow, bury him, and keep moving. Oh no, we're going to win a Coke Classic. Staff Sergeant Burnett parks his tank right on the trench. And these Iraqis had never seen a Marine in their life, I'm sure. And he's like 6'3", about 270 at the time. He stands up on top of the turret, takes off his flak jacket, and he dives head first, honest to God, into the trench so he could kill the Iraqi with his bare hands. Well, the Iraqis seeing this, they just throw up their hands and say, forget this, we surrender. So he captures like 20 guys right there. So he didn't get the Coke Classic. So anyway, the war's over. And word comes down that they want every unit to submit the bravest act of the unit. So we sent Burnett's name in, and you know, he captured 20 guys, whatever. Well, sure enough, a little while later, some guy from division comes down, and he wants all of Burnett's uniform, his weapon, his helmet, because they're going to put it in a friggin' museum. And they write up this story about how he did that. And I tell people, if you see it in the museum, flip it over and look on the back. And it'll tell you he did it just to win a Coke Classic, and not because he was the bravest guy in the world.
That's awesome.
But, so it makes you wonder. You look through the Marine Corps history book and see all these heroes who won these medals and stuff. You wonder, what's the true story behind all of this?
Mm-hmm.
Let's flip this over and Chesty pulled those 5 Navy crosses, and let's see what the real story is here. But I think it's kind of funny,
Got a Coke Classic involved there somewhere. Right.
Yeah, and to win a Coke Classic.
I got to thank you. These stories are absolutely invaluable. And the conversations we had leading up to this off the air, I have learned a tremendous amount about life, about football, about teamwork, leadership. I mean, it's been absolutely invaluable. I cannot thank you enough for the time that you've made with me personally and also with the channel.
Can we talk a little bit about the tanks leaving the Marine Corps?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, well, I don't know the facts. I'll admit that up front. I have no idea why we're doing what we're doing. Okay, but I'm just going to voice my opinion. I don't represent anybody. I have no affiliation. I'm just going to tell you what I think as best way I can. Is, I told you that story about the Gold Star mother,
mm-hmm.
and how much that affected me. And I wonder if in the future there will be people notifying parents of Marines that have been killed, that maybe the story would have been different had we had tanks on the battlefield. I was in long enough to see a complete evolution of tanks, from M48 tanks to M60s to M1A1s. So when we went from being a support element to a maneuver element, I mean, and I believe this, we didn't just change the history of the Marine Corps, we changed the history of America, because we became so significant on the battlefield. You have to wonder, how many people didn't attack us or didn't provoke us because of what Marines would do on the battlefield. We used to be attached to an infantry unit, and we would have, 2 tanks up on a hill, 2 tanks down on a bridge, and you support the infantry in the attack.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, and I'm convinced that General Steele was responsible for this because he's the godfather of tanks, that we had the infantry units and all the support units attached to us. And with an M1A1 tank, you can go across the battlefield knowing that there's nothing that the enemy has that can penetrate your tank. And you can fire precision engagements doing 50 miles an hour, and everybody else is doing the best to keep up with you.
Mm-hmm.
And the very best thing about a Marine tank unit is the guys working the tanks, because, we've talked about this warrior spirit and all of this. That's the basis of tank life. Everybody understands the concept. I'm not saying everybody lives the life, but everybody understands the concept of find a way to friggin' win, no matter what. I could name hundreds of situations I've been in my life where it didn't look good, but you just keep fighting and fighting. And with an M1A1 tank, you got the best tools in the world to win that fight, and you just keep moving forward. And at the speed that we can attack, like I said, 50 miles an hour, precision gunnery, that's as good as it gets, and the tank, the people on the tank are what make it all happen. They're not just regular Marines. And so when we, at the time that I was in, and I've been retired 23 years now, so I don't claim to know anything about anything in modern day tanking. But we learned warfare. And when I was at Second Tanks, we used to go up to Fort Pickett twice a year. And every Marine from top to bottom understood what commander's intent meant, and what it didn't mean, and what it meant to mean to say, I will ask for forgiveness rather than ask for permission. When you come upon a situation on the battlefield, seize the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Don't call and ask for permission to shoot a guy who's got his gun pointed right at you. You know, seize the moment and then call somebody and tell them what you did. You know, but you gotta probe their lines. You gotta find that weak spot. You gotta put your strength. It's like building a game plan for a football team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, find the weak link. Power all your guys right through the hole. Cut off their supply lines. Destroy their resupply. You know, and then just kill every single one of the friggin' bastards that has the audacity to step on a battlefield with the United States Marine. It's incredible. You know, I watched the Patton movie the other day. It was on TV. And that one scene where he says, I honestly feel sorry for the enemy. Well, I'm going to tell you, I never felt sorry for the communists or the terrorists or whoever's out there that is foolish enough to step on a battlefield with a bunch of Marines. The Marines with an attitude, they've probably been sitting out in the desert for months, just waiting for this moment, you know, and they're coming out there. When you go on float and that ramp hits the beach and the treads of that tank come off there and hit that sand, we're coming to sort of kick your ass. We're not here to negotiate. You know, we're not here to take pictures. We're coming here and we're going to kick your ass. And when we're done, we're going to go find some exotic port, have liberty before we go home. And that's that. You know, we'll be home before football season starts, I hope. You know, but, you know, and I just, it bothers me a lot. And again, I'm saying, I don't know the facts. I don't know why, but you know, if you're interested and if you got the will, Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, pick up the phone and call me and tell me. I would just like to know why we're doing this. That's all. I'm not judging you. I'm not complaining. I'm not, you know, pointing the finger at anybody. I just want to know, why would we do this? And the example that I gave somebody at dinner tonight was, you're getting ready to play the Super Bowl. You know, Tom Brady's your quarterback and he's at his peak in his career. And you sit him on the bench to put somebody else in that will go out and play the Super Bowl. Why would you do that? You know, and the same thing is true, because I don't understand and I want to know. So please, Sergeant Major, look up my phone number and call me, because I would like to listen and hear what you have to say. The second thing that it kind of bothers me about this is if I was reassigning all these warriors, where would I put them? And I don't know where they're going to go, but I would hope that we would see the value in a true warrior who lives the life. You know, not somebody who just says the words, guys who live the life, and get them in MOSs where they can be productive and help the Corps be more successful than it ever's been before. And that's really about all I have to say on this subject. I'm sure there's people out there watching this thinking you probably said too much already, but that's the way it goes.
Master Guns, I thank you. And I like I said before, the time we spend is invaluable to me. I do have to take a moment to thank the viewers, the folks that make this channel successful and continue to do so. If you've not already done so, please do subscribe. The subscriptions are what gives the channel its momentum, so that more people can see these videos and watch these amazing interviews. With that, I will thank you, Master Guns. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been incredible. With that, I'll give you parting comments.
Well, you know, I just I want to tell you and all the Marines out there how moved I am that at the beginning of the show you said that a number of people had said that I had influence on them, and I take that very seriously, and I know that how much some of the people that I've met have meant to me professionally and personally, and I take what you say very seriously. And thank you very much, not just for your comments, but for the honor of having been your leader throughout time. It's truly been a pleasure. Not every day was fun, but it certainly was rewarding. And I wish all of you the best of luck in your future. You know, I hope whatever happens, happens. But just remember one thing. If you remember nothing else, find a way to win. That's the bottom line. Thank you.